It's 11:59 at Gun Owners Radio, and this is the Penn Patriot, music and the truth until dawn. Right now, I've got a few words for some of our brothers and sisters in the occupied zone. The chair is against the wall. The chair is against the wall. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. It's 12 o'clock, Americans, and another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind American lines, this is your song.
And now it's time for our Gun Truth of the Week. So we try to come up with facts that you're not going to see in normal, discussion. Certainly not going to see it on the news. That gives you a better idea of what's really happening with gun ownership and the use of guns. So I wanted to talk about a myth here. The myth is that only cops are qualified enough and trained enough to be trusted with carrying a firearm. It's a complete and total myth, but the anti-gunners like to use it all the time. They like to drop it as if it's fact. A study by the Crime Prevention Research Center, that's the CPRC, analyzed active shooter incidents from 2014 to 2023 and found that CCW permit holders stopped 51.5% of these incidences compared to 44.6% stopped by police officers. Additionally, police officers were nearly 6 times more likely to be killed and 17% more likely to be wounded by armed civilians in these scenarios. Well, why is that? Several factors actually may contribute to the higher effectiveness of CCW holders in these situations, including Leo firearms training. So law enforcement officers and their training. Well, firearms are really just a small piece of a cop's job. What they learn is really limited and focused and frankly infrequent. Most departments only require cops to qualify once or maybe twice per year with firearms. Training and practice is another contributing factor. Many CCW holders are really avid firearms enthusiasts who engage in regular training and practice because they like it. It's fun. It's a hobby for them. So that potentially leads to greater proficiency. And then familiarity with firearms. Individuals who choose to carry concealed, if you choose to go through the process of getting a CCW, often have a stronger understanding of firearms and firearm safety and handling, which can translate to better performance in high-stress situations. Law enforcement officers, this is just another tool in their tool belt, quite literally. There's a lot of things they have to learn. They may not actually be into firearms. This is just another tool of being a police officer. And then situational awareness. Civilians may be more attuned to their surroundings and quicker to respond to threats, especially in public spaces where they are more likely to be present. So there are a lot of reasons that CCW holders clearly are at least as effective and probably more effective in a lot of statistics when it comes to preventing and stopping crime. So, as we always say, get a gun, get training, get your permit, and carry everywhere you possibly can. And that is your Gun Truth of the Week.
Remember that we are not lawyers and nothing that we say is to be taken as legal advice. Our sponsor, John Dillon, is a lawyer, and he has been helping to fight those gun violence restraining orders, GVROs, and more. So if you know somebody that's had their self-defense rights taken away without due process, give John a call. His website is dillonlawgp.com, and his phone number is 760-642-7150.
Okay, AB 1127 is, of course, the Glock ban, meaning that the state of California is attempting to ban anything that works similarly to the way a Glock works. They don't actually mention exactly what, they don't mention the word Glock in their ban in AB 1127. What they do is they describe a piece in the inner workings of a Glock that every single Glock has. It has to do with the function and how it fires. It's this cross-shaped piece that they say allows a Glock to be easily converted into a machine gun. So what they're doing with AB 1127 is basically banning it in essence, and saying that, hey, this thing is a future machine gun. And of course, that's already illegal, but that's not stopping them, because that is not the point that they're trying to make. They're trying to end as much gun ownership and use as they possibly can. The bill had some changes, was passed. It hasn't actually been signed by the governor yet, but we're certainly not betting our gun rights on Governor Newsom. We're pretty positive he's going to sign it. It once signed into law by Governor Newsom, it'll actually take effect on July 1st, 2026. Some of the changes that kind of went back and forth while this thing was developing: private party transfers will be allowed. It wasn't at first. It was basically a possession law, as well as a law against dealers. But now you can actually possess a Glock if you already own it, and private party transfers will still be allowed. This is, of course, going to end up just like the safe handgun roster, where it creates kind of a black market, maybe a gray market. When it comes to firearms. They also made sure that cops and their departments are exempt. So not just their department. So it's not just that, like, the Orange County Sheriff's Department or whatever can buy Glocks. But if you are a police officer, you can buy a Glock for your own personal use. So they've created this ability for law enforcement to purchase Glocks and then do a private party transfer or private sale to somebody who's legally able to possess it. Again, basically creating like this gray market, not quite a black market, but like a gray market, because cops apparently are a little bit more equal than the rest of us. The other thing is that stores, as long as they had the Glock in their inventory starting January 1st, they'll be able to sell it. It's kind of this weird thing that's happening. It doesn't actually take effect until July 1st, but they can sell anything in their inventory up till January 1st. Do I think there's going to be a run on Glocks? I think that for about 6 months, there's going to be some weirdness when it comes to Glock sales. Not sure what to tell you to do. Should you run out and buy a Glock or whatever right now? I don't know. I'm going to leave that up to you. I'm just going to give you the information. We can't actually sue until this takes effect, which, of course, will be July 1st. So there is going to be a period of time. It might just be a day. It might be longer than a day, where we'll have to pretty much put up with this. And I think there's going to be some confusion and questions when it comes to gun shops and what they should do with their inventory. And then we may not get an injunction. An injunction is certainly not guaranteed, but this thing is definitely going to go to the governor's desk, and he can sign it. He can veto it. He can do nothing, and that'll, of course, that bill will become a law without his signature if he does absolutely nothing. He has until October 12th to act, or the bill becomes law. Normally has 12 days to respond to past legislation, but has 30 days when the recess is closed. Only a veto is going to prevent Gavin Newsom from, or I should say, only a veto would, from him, if he's trying to prove that he's not anti-gun, is going to prevent this thing, despite whatever he said on Sean Ryan's show. This guy's vehemently anti-gun. He's not only been supportive of some of the worst gun legislation that California's had to offer, but he's been the driving force of some of the worst gun legislation in California. So it's not like he just simply voted for it, but he was the driving force and said, hey, let's do this, and I'm going to put my own dime and my own time behind it. So we're pretty sure he's going to do this. Now, what do you do from here? AB 1127, at this point, the only thing that can be done is that there's going to have to be a lawsuit. So you start funding the organizations that are going to have to sue to do this. I know that we're going to want to be a part of that, but we'll have to see. I'm sure all the majors are going to want to be a part of that for obvious reasons. So unfortunately, AB 1127 has passed, takes effect July 1st, 2026, depending on what the governor does, but the only hope is that he vetoes it, and I just don't see that happening. I really just don't see that happening. But I would gladly be wrong if Gavin Newsom decided to veto this thing to make some kind of political point. I don't really know. So anyway, keep fighting. Fund the organizations that are going to fight back. Get involved, and don't let this discourage you. Let it inspire you.
So when you're using it on your firearms, because it takes about 3 cleanings, so I like to say it's a clean shoot, clean shoot, clean shoot process, much like seasoning a cast iron skillet. So you're going to field strip your firearm, break it down, and then you're going to put our product on piece by piece by piece, covering the entire firearm. Then you're going to take the barrel, you're going to clean the barrel inside of that, and then you come back and you wipe it all off, and you're done. It's that easy. Remember, seal one and done.
Okay, now we're going to do Stump My Nephew. We found out years ago that my nephew Sam the gun man, is extremely good when it comes to gun trivia. So if you send us a question and we use it on the air, you'll get a hat or a shirt, whichever you prefer. And if you stump my nephew, then you're going to get some kind of special prize, although I don't think we've given away a special prize in a while.
It has been a while.
It's been a while. I think we stumped him sometime in the last couple of months, but man, it's few and far between that you get a special prize, which is good. So
good for us.
Yeah. So Sam, how you doing, man?
I'm well. How are you guys?
Good. You feeling confident today?
I don't know. The fact that you let off with that makes me feel less so.
A little reverse psychology. We love it.
All right. This is who wants to do this one? Who wants to do the stump?
I did the last one. I'll do
Dakota.
it.
All right, cool.
All
Go
right.
for it, Dakota.
So this is from Hank from Virginia. And the question is, the most common and popular shotgun used by the Allies in World War I was a Remington, and its designation was M1917. What was the second most popular, and what was one of its nicknames?
Oh, that one's easy. That's a Winchester Model 1897 trench gun.
Oh, wow.
Trench gun being the nickname.
What
was the nickname?
What was the nickname?
Trench gun. Or, okay, that's a nickname, but that's the one I'm going to use.
Do you think of any others? He gave a couple others.
I've heard of some people use the nickname trench broom, but I'm unsure of whether that refers to the shotgun or to the original Thompson.
Well, he put that as one of the options,
He
so
did.
we'll pretend that he's right because we don't know.
That's right. He also called it a hedgehog. Why would you? Any clues to why it would be nicknamed the hedgehog?
Well, if you
I'm
read
not
on
familiar
it
with that
actually
nomenclature.
It says referred to as a hedgehog by troops due to its use in clearing trenches and hedgerows in combat.
There you go. You know what a hedgerow is? Other than a lyric from a Led Zeppelin song?
No. Is it like a big row of hedges? Like big bushes?
It kind of is. Sam, do you know what a hedgerow is, or should I explain it?
Yeah, it's a kind of a berm with vegetation on it that's found at the edges of farm fields in Western Europe.
Okay. Yeah, like I've seen them on, is it Clarkson's farm? They've got these big rows of hedges on the edge of their property. It's like a UK farm show.
It is. So it's like France and England and parts of Europe, and I think they date back to the Romans.
Oh, wow.
And really what they did is the Romans were, traipsing across the continent, and they'd set up these communities, and they'd say, all right, we're gonna section this out. Here's a farm, and here's a farm, and here's a farm, and they'd put a hedgerow. But during World War I, they were used, for
concealment for soldiers and stuff.
Exactly right.
Interesting.
So they'd have these hedgerows, and they'd hear a bustle on their hedgerow.
And then they'd use their Winchester Model 1897.
There you go. And they turned into the trench broom.
That's funny.
Yeah, it was the second most widely used shotgun after the M1917 Remington pump action, which was also used extensively in World War I. The Model 1897 was favored for its pump action reliability and ability to fire rapidly, making it devastating in close quarters trench fighting. Hey, Sam, there's one difference between the Model 1897 and the
1917.
And the 1917, as far as function, with how they were able to use it. Do you know where I'm getting at?
I think so. The 1897 didn't have a trigger disconnector, so it could be slam fired. And what
Exactly
that means,
right. Explain what
that
slam
means
fire is.
in the context of a pump action shotgun is that ordinarily with a shotgun that has a trigger disconnector, if you can imagine your Mossberg 500 or your Remington 870 or what have you, if the action is closed, you squeeze the trigger, the firearm discharges. If you pull back on the slide to open the action, then push forward again to cycle the action while holding down the trigger, nothing will happen. You have to release the trigger so it can reset, then you squeeze the trigger and it'll fire again. Without a disconnector, like in the original 1897, if you hold down the trigger and work the slide with sufficient force, then the force of you pushing it back into battery will detonate the firing pin by forcing it will detonate the primer by forcing the firing pin against it. So it's you can kind of just hold down the trigger and work the action, and as long as you're doing it with enough authority, it'll fire as fast as you can move the pump back and forth.
A little less coordination required. You don't have to like time your trigger presses to when the pump is fully forward, right?
Pretty much.
Which would obviously, I think that's probably the big. Although the M1917 there were more in the war. I think the reason that this was a popular trench gun and turned into the Hedgehog was because you were able to slam fire it. You think that was hugely helpful?
Well, you get potentially speed at the expense of reliability. So slam firing a shotgun is something that would only need to be done under specific circumstances. So I can't speak to whether that was something that specifically endeared it to soldiers, but it is a notable curiosity about the firearm.
There you go. All right. Well, mental note, next time I put out a punk album, I'm going to call it Slam Fire by the Hedgehog. So you could
Sounds good.
make note of that. So, all right, Sam, awesome job. Anything you want to promote as far as writing? You doing anything cool? Any articles coming out?
No, not a whole lot. Though I will say, as I mentioned previously on the show sometime in the past year, I have been working on a project for the Marine Corps Association's Leatherneck magazine about notable infantry small arms that the Marine Corps has used throughout its now 250-year history, 250 years in November. And the MCA has been putting out a series of very brief videos of me in a museum vault going over and talking about some notable features of those weapons. So you can find those on Facebook and on LinkedIn.
That's cool, man. All right. Well, great. Thank you. Awesome job. You got it right. Big round of applause for that. So good job. And I'll see you. Well, I'm actually going to see you next week.
Yeah, see you in Utah.
In Utah. We're going to, where are we going? We're going to the
Gun rights.
Yeah.
Gun rights policy.
Gun rights
The museum, though, too.
Oh, the Browning Museum.
We're going to the Browning
Yep,
Museum.
The Browning Museum.
And we're going to the Gun Rights Policy Conference.
Right.
And we're going to AmCon. So if you're in St. Louis, if you're in Salt Lake City and you want to say hi to Sam the Gunman and try to stump him, check him out. So cool, man. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for having me on.
This is brought to you by Cargo, cases and rugged gear outfitters in El Cajon. Go to cargostores.com, buy something today, or visit them at 423 Broadway in El Cajon. There are two enemies of your firearms, rust and the government. The good news is Cargo has your back on both fronts. As a proud sponsor, they're helping us fight to get more pro-Second Amendment officials into office. And their rugged cases help you keep your firearms secure and protected. Built like a tank, Cargo cases are stackable, weatherproof, and ready for anything. Whether you're hitting the range or going off the grid, you need a cargo case. Whether for your gun or other equipment, you need a cargo case. And here's something that's just for our listeners. If you buy a cargo case in the store at Cargo Rugged Gear Outfitters in El Cajon, just mention Gun Owners Radio, and you're going to get a free desiccant pack. And that's going to help keep your gear bone dry, battle ready, and rust free. Visit them at 423 Broadway in El Cajon. Great products, great prices, and uncommonly good service. Cases and Rugged Gear Outfitters. Cargo. Check them out. Massad Ayoob, welcome.
Hey, it's good to be back, Mike.
Yeah, you couldn't get enough of us here in San Diego, so you're back.
You guys do a great job.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Really appreciate all that you do. I appreciate the fact that you're still training people. We got so much good feedback from your class and your live fire last time. It's pretty amazing. But what struck me was, the quality of the information, obviously. People say, oh, yeah, I learned a lot and that sort of thing. But it was more of I can't believe I got to train with Massad Ayoob was kind of the attitude, which I don't know how that makes you feel. Well,
it's a stroke to the ego. But in the essence, it's never about the instructor so much as it's about the material.
Yeah. Still, people were really happy they got to train with you. I don't think that people thought it was a possibility here in Southern California, and so they were super happy about that. But I'm curious, how do you, looking back at your career, decades of your career, how would you describe your position in the Second Amendment world?
Well, I was third generation of armed American citizens in my family in this country. I grew up with a gun, and it was like, the stove and the radio before I remember when we got the first television. And it kind of surprised me later to learn that there were places and people who had chosen not to be armed. When I was a little boy, I learned at about the same time in the early 1950s that there were parts of America that were segregated, and figured out, hey, that ain't right. And there were parts of America where you could not get a permit to carry a gun to protect yourself and your family. And I realized that definitely ain't right. I grew up in New Hampshire, and it was kind of understood. When you're 16, you'll get your driver's license and your hunting license. When you're 21, you'll get your permit to carry a gun. And it was horrifying to find out that there were places one could not protect one's family, especially because in my family there had been instances going back to my grandfather where they had needed that gun, and without that gun, those men would not have survived, I would not have been born, and my children would not have been born. So it's a very visceral issue with me. And one point I've tried to make last year at the Gun Rights Policy Conference was historically this whole debate has been the other side works emotion and we work logic and law.
Right.
I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think our side needs to be touching the emotional element more. Now, I remember a few years ago at the annual NRA meeting, like every year, the Everytown people had their collection of 40, 50, maybe on a good day as many as 100 people. Mm-hmm. And the local news media would say, oh, look at all the anti-gunners who've come out to protest NRA. And there were 60,000 of us inside the convention center that they never bothered to look at or ask. And they would do their dramatic read-off of the names of gun death victims, two-thirds of whom were suicides. And while most suicide is tragic, at the same time, it's not something that says, okay, because other people chose to kill themselves, you might choose to kill yourself, so we, Big Daddy and Big Mama, are going to take the means away from you because we don't trust you. But they would have them, they would have their people taking turns reading, here's the name of so-and-so who died tragically by a gun. Mm-hmm. The meeting was hosted by the National Rifle Association, which for decades has run its Armed Citizen column that those of you out there who are NRA members, be honest. I know you read gun magazines in the bathroom, And I know the first thing you look at in American Rifleman is the Armed Citizens column.
I can attest to that.
All of which are news clippings sent in by members from news media
Yeah.
of armed citizens saving lives with guns. We had 60, 70,000 people. Now, we could have ringed that giant convention center with a line of our people talking about each of these items that we cite to you is innocent people whose lives were saved because they had a gun when they desperately needed one. Nobody did. I wrote to the then president of NRA, executive director, and suggested that and never even got the courtesy of a reply. But the fact is, if you look at the statistics of most recently John Lott, prior to him, going back all the way into the last century, the Wright-Rossi study that showed the vast majority of defensive gun usages end without bloodshed when the bad guy realizes, I've bitten off more than I can chew, I'm leaving now. We need to be reminding the public of those, that those lives saved are as important to us and as important to society as the lives tragically lost to monsters who commit murders in places where they know they're safe. The most recent incident at the Catholic school.
Yeah, in Minnesota.
The shooter's manifesto made it clear they had picked a school because there would be no one with a gun who could return fire on them. And we've seen that again and again, going all the way back into the 1990s. I would recommend your listeners get the new book by Ed Monk called The First 30 Seconds. Ed Monk is a soldier and cop who has done tremendous research on this and has probably emerged as our current leading authority on preventing school shootings, mass murders, and that sort of thing. He's made the point that the enemy is not just the killer with the gun, the enemy is the clock. Once they start shooting, that clock is ticking, people are dying every few seconds until someone stops them. The other side says, oh, we must ban evil guns like the Glock and the AR-15. When that happens, we should just call the police, who will come with Glocks and AR-15s and get there too late to save many lives. We've known since the 1990s. Hell, we've known since all the way back into the last quarter of the 20th century, the Massad massacre in Israel, when they said, enough, what we're going to do is arm the teachers. We're not going to make them carry guns, but those who volunteer will be taught by the Mishmar Ezrachi, which was their essentially their civil guard. They'll be taught how to shoot and when to shoot. They'll carry pistols. They'll be concealed. The students will not know which teachers and which administrators and which school personnel have guns. And certainly any perpetrator entering won't know. But if they enter with a gun, there'll be people right there, right now, in the moment, who can stop them on the ground when the deadly force breaks out. And that virtually ended that type of massacre in Israel. We've seen it since in the Philippines. We've seen it since in Peru, where it's worked. But here, there has been the curse of political identity. The teachers' unions, the NEA, for example, have been absolutely horrified by the idea, and no, we don't want armed teachers. We want gun control. Well, what we found is the killings continue. Laws don't stop those who have already chosen. They're going to violate the most rigid laws of God and man by murdering the innocent. Most of them are prepared to die, and many of them are suicidal and do die in what they perceive to be a blaze of glory. And then the same media that craps on us and calls the NRA a terrorist organization lionizes these people. If you go back to really the seminal school shooting, 1999, the Columbine High School massacre in Littleton, Colorado, those two little monsters wound up with their faces on the covers of Time and Newsweek. Google it. Look it up. My generation remembers the song that went, "You want to see my smiling face on the cover of the Rolling Stone." Rolling Stone magazine put Sarnev, the Boston bomber, on the cover of the Rolling Stone.
In a flattering way, too.
Oh, yeah.
In a rock star way. It was really gross.
And I'm told if you go to the dark web, you'll find all kinds of websites that glorify these monsters. And what the media has taught them is that if you want to be famous, if you want to be remembered, everybody who remembers Abraham Lincoln also remembers John Wilkes Booth. All you got to do is get a gun, murder some innocent people, and you'll have your notoriety forever, and everyone will know your name. Some of their manifestos have actually said, "Everyone will know my name," or words to that effect.
Yeah.
And I frankly blame the media far more than anyone can honestly blame the gun owners of America.
Well, there's a lot I want to touch on that you just talked about. One of the things you talked about were civil rights in general, and of course, after Heller, the rest of the world realized what gun owners already knew, in that the Second Amendment is, of course, in fact, a civil right. And I don't think the general public, realizes or antis or media. I think there's a lot of subgroups in America that don't realize how much in common gun enthusiasts and gun activists have with other civil rights groups, other civil rights interests, particularly Jim Crow laws, things that are based on race. I don't think we get enough credit, and I don't think there's enough realization for how Second Amendment activists react to that kind of thing, how horrible we believe it is. In fact, there are people in the gun rights community who say, hey, that whole thing was based on anti-gun rhetoric and laws and whatever. And you watch Second Amendment activists cheer on, the rooftop Koreans in L.A., cheer on, all kinds of different examples of other civil rights groups saying, hey, we need to be able to defend ourselves. We need to be able to stand up for ourselves. And I don't know, am I overplaying that? Am I wrong?
You are not. Any of you watching this, do a Google search for the racist roots of gun control. And you'll find that, prior to the Civil War, most of America was like the state of Vermont. If you want to carry a gun, go ahead. You don't need a permit, but we will forbid you to even own one if you're convicted of a violent felony or if you're adjudicated mentally incompetent. After the war, during the Reconstruction period, the Klan types were all saying, "Oh my God, the slaves are freed. They'll be able to have guns. They'll kill us all. What are we going to do?" And the theory came up, well, gee, let's pass gun control laws where you've got to have a license from the sheriff to carry a gun. And since we white folks are the majority, we'll make sure we elect sheriffs who will give them to us and not to them. And that was the history of it. If you look at the Sullivan Law in 1911 in New York, that was largely to disarm the Irish and the Italians who were migrating in large volume at that time. And basically it was the same principles, guns for we, but not for thee. When I was growing up, there were 7 states that had no provision for the ordinary armed citizen to carry a loaded weapon in public to protect themselves and their family. Most of the states were may issue, meaning that the issuing authority had carte blanche who they would give the permits to. And in many, many jurisdictions, that turned into, we'll give you the permit if you're white, male, rich, and politically connected. At that time, there was only one state, Vermont, that permitted one to carry a permit. It was the first permitless carry state. And I can't help but notice over the years, the state of Vermont per capita has always been one of the lowest and often the lowest in violent crime, giving the lie to the whole thing that, oh my God, if people can carry guns, blood will run in the streets. Now, look how far we've come, Mike.
Yeah.
29 states, and we're close to 30, depending how the next one goes.
If you told me 10 years ago we'd have 29 states that were constitutional carry, I probably would have laughed. I said, there's just no way.
By 2021, all states had some provision for the concealed carry permit.
Mm-hmm.
And the majority were now shall issue, requiring the issuing authorities to grant the permit or show good cause why not. And of course, in 2022, the Bruin decision made the entire country shall issue. And that triggered what can only be called the spiteful reaction in certain parts of the country where you're familiar with. They said, okay, then we'll declare every place to be a sensitive area. Times Square will now be as sensitive an area as the courthouse. And we at the Second Amendment Foundation and throughout the gun owners' civil rights movement are fighting that.
Yeah, and in a really intelligent way. The question now is, so like you said, they're turning everything into a sensitive area. The question from our attorneys is now, okay, define a sensitive area. What makes an area sensitive? You can't simply label it sensitive. Why is it sensitive? Are there sensitive things there? What is going on there? And now they're forcing them to actually define, and prove. And why does this need to be a sensitive area? Which I think is a brilliant way to go. And I believe it's going to be the path to victory when it comes to getting rid of these horribly overreaching laws that basically ban you from carrying anywhere outside of the home in California is really what they were trying to do.
The fight continues. The struggle continues. The good news is we're winning more than we're losing.
We are. Now, the laws that we were talking about, like the carry laws, we were saying, hey, we're going to make a sheriff responsible for issuing a permit so you can carry. I don't think people really think about or realize what a double-edged sword that is, because not only does it prevent people from carrying, like you said, in the racist South, they said, hey, we're not going to let those people carry. We're just going to let rich white males, whatever. But the other thing it does is it now gives a new reason to arrest people that you dislike. Mm-hmm. So it now backs people into a corner. Hey, if you do want to defend yourself, not only am I not going to give you the piece of paper, but if you do choose to carry around the most effective self-defense tool ever created, and you do carry and you get caught, now I have a whole new way to put you in jail for a nice long time.
Yeah, it's a classic example of malum prohibitum. In laws, they distinguish between malum and se. If anyone's taking notes, it's M-A-L-U-M, next word I-N, next word S-E, and malum prohibitum. Malum prohibitum means it's against the law because we decided it was bad, so we passed a law against it. Malum in se means the thing is evil in and of itself. Malum in se crimes are those that, since the dawn of civilized mankind, it's been understood that these are bad for society and they are rigidly prohibited. Murder, manslaughter, robbery, rape, kidnapping, things of that nature. Malum prohibitum is like the old blue laws. You can't buy beer on Sunday, for example. Something that made somebody feel good and it clicked into someone's belief system or someone's little checklist on their political identity card. And I think the difference is the difference between morals and ethics. One could argue that the root word of morals is mores, a cultural thing, something that is subject to change over the years and different attitudes and might be accepted in one society but not in another. Ethics, I think you can make a very good argument that the root word is ethos. And here we're talking benchmark values, things that historically throughout the history of mankind have been, these things are good, these things are bad, and we will punish you if you do them. Now, your concealed carry laws, for example, are classic malum prohibitum. Best example I can give you is picture you have 4 quadruplets. say each as they grew to adulthood became a professional of one stripe or another, family people, and one lives in Vermont, one lives in Connecticut, one lives in upstate New York, and one lives in New York City. They've all made the choice to, just as they keep fire extinguishers in their homes, just like they learn first aid, to carry a firearm as emergency life-saving rescue equipment for the first responder who is right there when the thing happens and can hold the line against death until the professionals can be summoned to get there and take over. Well, let's say all four of them decide they're going to have a reunion in New York City, and all of them happen to be carrying guns when they leave their home because they're all perfectly legal there. And they get in a car crash, they're all knocked unconscious, and when they get to the emergency room, they're found to be carrying guns. Well, the one who lives in New York City and has a permit from NYPD will simply get his gun back, and they'll say, gee, buddy, hope you feel better. The guy who got his gun permit upstate, let's say in Buffalo, New York is the one remaining state where one community, the city of New York, will not recognize concealed carry permits issued elsewhere in the state. And everyone elsewhere in the state who's given a permit is expressly told this, and they're told if they carry their gun in New York City, they'll lose the permit. That quadruplet is going to be arrested for felony illegal concealed carry with a minimum mandatory severe sentence in the city of New York. And historically what happens with that, the judges sort of roll their eyes, say the guy had a permit to carry, for heaven's sake. We're going to put the case on file, and if a year from now you haven't done anything bad, it's going to go away. But he'll never get his permit back because he violated the standards of the permit by carrying the gun in New York City. The guy from Connecticut, because New York State has no reciprocity with any other state, and for many years now has had no non-resident permits nor provision for non-resident permits, he is going to be arrested for illegal concealed carry, and he is going to have the minimum mandatory sentence. He'll be at least a year in jail, might be 2, depending on the judge. The same will be true of the guy from Vermont, who needed no permit where he lived, was doing the exact same thing as the other 3 siblings, but had no permit to reciprocate with, even if they had accepted reciprocity. I don't think any thinking person can see that as a fair outcome. Yet that is what the stage is set for, the way New York and many other states now are dealing with this. While self-defense law is actually rather homogeneous around the country, the wording might be different, but the rules are pretty much the same. Gun laws, what you can have, where you can have it, where you can carry it. Mike, it's a 50-piece patchwork quilt. There are no 2 states that are absolutely identical in that respect.
Yeah.
That's why I recommend anyone who carries a gun, particularly if you travel, handgunlaw.us. Handgunlaw.us is, in my experience, the most up-to-date website for things like local gun laws and reciprocity agreements. The reciprocity agreements are made between the attorneys general of the various states. They can change overnight on a whim, and it never gets nationally publicized. You may have been legal living in statewide, carrying state Z. State Z now stops recognizing the statewide permit. There's never an announcement made, and you, in all good faith, go to state Z carrying. You're now breaking the law. And I don't know what your language rules are for this particular podcast, but I smell poultry feces.
Well, it is, and it just doesn't, it stopped making sense a long time ago, and it really truly worries me that it boils down to an irrational fear or hatred or both of guns. It stopped being logical, helpful, it feels like a few decades ago somebody drew a line and you picked what side, and then that's it. It doesn't really truly feel like the other side is really trying to help people. You talked about the Minnesota horrific murder at I believe was it a Catholic school? I believe.
Catholic school.
And I watched Jen Psaki talk about it. Jen Psaki used to be the press secretary for Obama, and now she's just a talking head on some left-wing news channel. And she said through crocodile tears that the other side has nothing more to offer than thoughts and prayers. And that's simply not true. We have a lot of solutions to offer, including, getting rid of gun-free zones, helping to protect children with professional security, the same way we protect airports and money, and analyzing people. You brought up the statistic that something like 70% of people who die in a gun's involved, that's a suicide. And the other 30%, frankly, the vast majority of those are professional criminals, probably killing another professional criminal. Study it, figure it out. How do you prevent that? We've done nothing but give ground and offer solutions and try to be a part of the solution. And still, here's somebody at the very, very tip top of the political world saying that, hey, all the other side has to offer is thoughts and prayers, which is objectively not true. But what scares me about that, it really burned me. I was really offended by it, that she would describe me that way. But what scares me about it is that she isn't lying, that she actually believes that, and that it really truly is just an irrational fear or hatred of guns. And I'm curious, what are your thoughts about that? And then how do we deal with it? How do we deal with an irrational, broadly irrational opinion that is just not true in any way? You know what I mean? It's so irrational that it just doesn't even make any sense anymore. It's hard to even combat with logic or emotion because it seems so out of left field.
Well, as I said earlier, if a quarter century ago we had listened to the voices that said follow the Israeli model, have armed, professionally trained personnel in the schools prepared when something like this breaks out, the casualty count would be greatly reduced, and the deterrent effect would be enormous. Read that particular killer's manifesto. It's available online. They made it very clear, well, I was considering going here, but, there might be professional security, and they might shoot back. I'll go here. And we've seen that again and again. They may want to die in a blaze of glory shooting it out with a SWAT team. Let me tell you, none of their sick fantasies include getting shot in the back of the head by Miss Grundy, the history teacher. In the community where I currently live, they have armed the school teachers. They have been very well trained by the local sheriff's department. They have done a great job of keeping their identities confidential. Even the kids have no idea which teachers are armed and which aren't.
Yeah, because they're not making every teacher do it. They're just giving them the option.
No one has ever said arm all the teachers. That has always been, allow volunteers in the faculty. And not just the faculty, but the administration, the support staff, et cetera, responsible adults, whoever they might be. Some might be military veterans, some might be retired police, some might simply be ordinary citizens who understand the responsibility of protecting the innocent. The teacher in an elementary school is a surrogate parent. It is the duty of any kind of parent to protect the child with whom they've been entrusted. If they had listened to us, I think this trend crime of these sick psychopaths and sociopaths murdering children would have been greatly reduced with that deterrent effect. But people get their ego invested in their particular political identity. People who've never really thought about this more than superficially. All right, I identify as a progressive. I don't know, what's my position on this issue? Let's say progressives are anti-gun. Yeah, I'm anti-gun. And they haven't really thought it out for themselves. And admittedly, we see the same thing with some other issues on the other side. It's not just a liberal versus conservative thing. Some of the strongest voices for responsible armed citizenry have come from the left. Look into the past. A good friend of mine was Professor Don Cates. the great law professor who did some of the seminal work in the current gun rights movement. He marched with William Kessler during the freedom marches back in the day. Mark Benenson, who for many years was head of Amnesty International. You don't get a whole lot farther left than that. Both were very strong voices for gun owners' civil rights. The same reason being they both felt any true liberal should be for all individual rights, including the right to self-protection. And go back further into history. Lord William Blackstone, who wrote Blackstone's Commentaries on the Common Law, the great authority on the English legal system from which our own derives, said that self-defense was the highest of all human rights. Okay, one of my pet peeves with our side is the terminology. I do not believe in gun rights. Guns are objects. Objects don't have rights. This fight of ours, if you are pro-Second Amendment, you are a civil rights activist and you are most certainly a human rights activist. Be proud of it and remind the other side of that. They are the ones attempting to restrict freedom. They are the ones who would confiscate property for no good reason, that take property from people that they have legally purchased and responsibly owned to make them feel good and feel safer. That's progressive. That's antithetical to any reasonable definition of liberalism or progressive thought. Superficial values and empty symbolism are one of the curses of this whole debate.
I think it's extremely well put, and I think it's a real strong point. SAF last week, I believe it was, came out with a position statement. I don't remember if it was officially considered an amicus brief but anyway, it was a position statement. I believe it was. But it was an official statement basically saying, hey, if you look at the Ninth Circuit, en bancs in Second Amendment cases have become ridiculously common. If you look at en bancs, in other words, for those who don't know exactly what I'm talking about, if you get a decision, by a judge, you can take it to a panel of 3 judges, and it's called an en banc, which is a Latin term. But it's basically an appeal. It's saying, hey, we want 3 more judges to take a look at what's already happened, and we want them to analyze it. It is extremely rare for that to happen in the legal system. It's there. It's a way for people to exercise their right, their judicial right. But it's extremely rare, except in the Ninth Circuit, and except on Second Amendment cases. I don't know if you had a chance to review that paper at all. But I thought it was really, really well put, and it was about time someone pointed it out. Do you think that we will continue? Do you think that there's a path to win in the Ninth Circuit? Or do you think we're just going to have to continue to try to ramrod it to the Supreme Court? Or what are your thoughts on the Ninth Circuit in general?
I'm not. Well, the Ninth Circuit historically has been anti-gun. It is human nature to be resistant to changing your mind. That said, I think it's a classic example of why we have to take things sometimes to the highest court.
I'm hopeful. It has changed enough. Maybe not enough. Maybe enough's not the right word. It's changed a little bit under the Trump administration the first time around, and I keep hoping and praying that they'll make even more progress this time around with the Ninth Circuit. But God, it's so frustrating. I know it's frustrating to our members and people that watch, and I think some of them have maybe started to lose faith, and I just don't think that's a good idea. That being said, I also think that our side puts too much in the judicial basket. In other words, we've gotten away from other avenues to solve this problem, like good old-fashioned roll up your sleeves, get people elected, activism. And then you've already touched on just messaging in general, helping to change the culture. I think there's a danger in complacency and just kind of going, someone will sue. I'll send my $22 or whatever, and someone will sue and we'll get it taken care of. What are your thoughts on activism in general? Have you seen it work? Do you think it's work, or do you think, hey, we just got to solve this in the courtroom?
We need both sides of the fight. Certainly the courtroom side, which is what Second Amendment Foundation is primarily dedicated to, but also the legislative side. Citizens Committee for the Right to Keep and Bear Arms, NRA, and particularly NRA's ILA, the Institute for Legislative Action. And what you guys are doing here, one of the most important things and some of our most strong successes have been on the grassroots level, the way San Diego gun owners have been able to do it within their community, the way some of the state groups have been able to lobby in the State House and positively change laws. That's where we got the 29 states following the Vermont model, which had been unthinkable when Mike and I were younger. So we're making some great strides there. I wouldn't say that we're focusing too much on either side. It would be like my parents and your grandparents in World War II saying, "Oh, we're fighting the Germans too hard. Let's fight the Japanese a little better."
That's probably a good way of putting it.
We have two fronts to fight in this war, and we need to be fighting them both.
I agree. I have this personal little issue. It's just kind of a minor issue within the Second Amendment world that I really hope I see some progress on. And there's a guy out of Florida in Congress who's it looks like he's attempting to at least try to fix it. I want to see military bases adopt the carry laws of the host state. So in other words, if there's a military base in Kentucky and you can legally carry in Kentucky, you should be able to carry on base. They did it with national parks back in 2010 under the Obama administration. I think they should do it in military bases, mainly so that dependents who shop and live and go there don't have to give up their right to self-defense. And I actually brought it up on the show a couple weeks ago, and I was really surprised by the comment section. There were a number of people who said, "Hey, I'm a retired military guy, and I have to decide between, some of the things I've earned in the military, like shopping at the commissary and getting cheaper gas, and defending myself." And I think that's important. But it's like this little kind of side project of mine that I really hope happens. Is there something like that for you? Do you have some kind of like little project like, man, I hope this changes,
I can't say any particular one. The other side got a lot of mileage out of banning AR-15s, for example, for 18 to 21-year-olds. And that bothers me, okay? You're 18 years old, you're old enough to join the Army or the Marine Corps or whatever. You're old enough to die for your country with a real assault rifle in your hand that has a full auto switch or something considerably more powerful that you're trusted with. But you can't have a semi-automatic AR-15 to practice with at home and to learn to become more skilled with the tools of your trade before you sign up. Now, if you look at history, America's most effective warfighters have been those who literally grew up with a gun in their hand. Why was the National Rifle Association formed in 1871 by a bunch of Union officers? Because they had noticed in the war between the states that the Southern infantrymen tended to be much better, more effective marksmen on the battlefield than Northern. And the reason for that had been, of course, the Northern states had become so much more industrialized that fewer people were growing up hunting, fewer were growing up in rural areas where they could easily shoot a gun. And the Southern folks tended to be more rural, tended to use the squirrel rifle to feed their family, and have the skills to snipe a Union general off his horse at the Battle of Spotsylvania Courthouse. And their purpose with founding the NRA was to make this country the nation of riflemen that it had been characterized as since the Revolutionary War. And if you go into the 20th century, the most honored American warrior of World War I, Alvin York, grew up shooting small game, shooting deer, and winning turkey shoots in the local matches. and became the most formidable individual fighter in the Ardennes. In World War II, Audie Murphy, same exact story. Grew up feeding his family with rabbits that he'd shot and so forth. Was absolutely deadly on the battlefield and became our most honored soldier. In Vietnam, men like Carlos Hathcock, who had been a national rifle champion before he went overseas. Before he went to Vietnam, he had won the Wimbledon Cup shooting at 1,000 yards at Camp Perry. And was so devastating, the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese Army put a huge bounty on his head because he had killed so many enemy soldiers. In the current conflict, men like Chris Kyle, same exact story. They made the best warfighters. Those same attributes make people better able to protect their own
So
families.
disallowing somebody who's 18, 19, and 20 years old to be able to get that kind of training is something that's particularly close to your heart.
Well, it is. You're old enough to marry. You're without your parents' consent. You're old enough to fight and die for your country. You should be old enough to walk into a store and buy a damned AR-15.
There you go. I'll tell you a quick story. So my dad was did a whole big career in the Navy, and my dad's an officer and a gentleman. He's just a really great guy, and he was traveling with a chief. I think he was a senior chief, who was an old Southern salty chief. You know, kind of spoke his mind. And he's got this story about how they went to England on business, and they had like a day off or whatever. So they went and did the tour of the Tower of London. And apparently, it's a back then at least it was a weapons museum, and they kind of started at like sticks and stones.
The Imperial War Museum.
Imperial, okay. Yeah. And I guess they started at like sticks and stones, and then brought you up to modern day. And there was a very prim and proper Englishman who was giving the tour, and the salty Southern chief said, "Hey, I noticed you didn't talk about the Revolutionary War." And this prim and proper Brit said, "Well, we don't consider that a significant issue in military or a time period in military history." And the guy turned to my dad and said, "Well, a bunch of drunken squirrel hunters beating the crap out of the entire military for the Brits? I'd guess not." My dad was ready to just melt into a puddle.
Well, if you want to look at the effect of the American Revolution on British armament, when they put their muskets against regiments that had a significant number of riflemen instead of musketeers, they started awfully quick to get the pattern 1776 rifles from Germany, and Patrick Ferguson, the Scotsman, developed the first breech-loading flintlock rifle for the Brits. So I would respectfully submit the colonials did teach a few lessons to the British redcoats.
I was surprised. I actually learned that lesson. I went to Williamsburg in Virginia, and they had a gunsmith who would build a firearm like it was 1790 or 1776. And I was talking to him about it, and they weren't building it for war. They weren't building it for soldiers. They were building it for like the common guy to go hunt a deer with, and they were rifled. And I said, "Oh, I'm surprised by that, because at the time, a lot of the guns were for military use were smoothbore." And he pointed out, like, yeah, but these guys got to shoot a deer, at 150 yards. That isn't going to stand there in a line and wait for him, So I was really surprised that the firearms that they were building for civilians were, probably more deadly than the firearms they were building for military, which is kind of funny, because the argument's so frequently made that, hey, in 1791, they didn't expect people to own military arms. Well, no, they expected them to own firearms that were even better than the military had.
They brought their own. George Washington's 43-page handwritten last will and testament devotes many of the pages to the disposition of his vast weapons collection. He had at least one custom-made flintlock rifle built to his specifications, and whenever he was on the battlefield, had 2 pistols holstered on his saddle.
Nice.
So if you look back, it was an American tradition. There were In the colonies, remember, they didn't have organized law enforcement. They had no communications for emergencies. And oftentimes during when there were Indian raids, people were required to bring a musket and X rounds of ammunition with them every time they went to church. So there is certainly a history of it. And if you look back at the constitutions of the original colonies prior to 1791, and of course those original colonial constitutions were part and parcel of the research done by the framers of the Bill of Rights. Several of them had expressly mentioned personal self-defense. So it's there, folks. You just have to look for it.
Exactly.
You can't be selective based on your political persuasion.
So I'm the worst gun collector ever. I am so horrible at collecting guns. I'm so basic. I barely have any actual firearms, to be honest with you. I don't even need a safe. I mean, I'm really, really bad at it. And I'm not real good with being knowledgeable about some of the more historic firearms. But I recently acquired something that's kind of neat, that I'm kind of happy with. I don't know how many people are going to be impressed with, but I kind of like it. I had to get rid of my shotgun. I had a hand-me-down shotgun from my dad. It was a Winchester 1200 that he acquired in the 60s. And I gave that to my nephew so that his grandfather could see him enjoy it. But now I need a shotgun to go do, clays with, right? So I found thanks to a local FFL, I found a J.C. Higgins circa 1950s double barrel side-by-side with like a big old 28-inch barrel and a walnut stock. And for those who don't know, J.C. Higgins was the name brand. It was the in-house store brand. There you go, for Sears. Yeah, which is kind of neat. It was actually manufactured by AYA out of it's a Spanish company,
yeah. Which is a very good company.
Well, that's what I found out. I kind of like the history. I kind of like that it had its association with Sears. I kind of like the fact that AYA actually is a very reputable, company. And then I guess that whole line, or they produced like a Ted Williams line for a while, which is kind of neat. Anyway, I'm
Ted Williams signature models.
Yeah, which I kind of like it. I'm kind of obsessed with this silly old shotgun that I paid all of about $150 for. Can't wait to use it. I just got it. I'm just curious. Is there what's in your collection that kind of you're tickled about? A find or something you're just really, really happy about?
Oh, the inherited guns. I have one of my grandfathers, several of my dad's, and those, of course, are going to stay in the family and be passed down. Guns that have an emotional connection, like something I won for winning a pistol match. Guns that I carried on duty.
Give me a specific make and model that you particularly...
Well, I started with I got my first Colt 45 auto when I was 12.
Oh, wow.
It was 1918 production, $37.50 military surplus. And I'd read the writings of Jeff Cooper in Guns and Ammo magazine. I said, Dad, I've got to have one of these. My father like, all right. And that was my first 45. I still have the thing. Ruined its collector value because back then we all, when you can get them for $37.50, nobody thinks I have a precious collector's item. I mean, they made them by the million.
What did you do to it? Did you?
Oh, had it reblued.
Yeah, that's
new barrels. I put a Series 70 barrel in with the collet bushing when they came out. New sights, new grip safety, new grips, and all that. And the gun would be worth a few thousand now if I'd left it as it was. But to me, it's more the memories that are worth more than the cash value.
That's awesome.
So I wound up with several 1911s. I'm kind of a 1911 guy.
Now, did you meet Colonel Cooper? Did you know him?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah? How did you guys meet?
I met him in 75. Did a story on him for one of the police professional journals, actually. And he was just starting to build gun sight. He and his wife Janelle were living in the double-wide trailer that later became the first administrative building. Range 1 had just been built.
This
And,
is
we
in
did a little bit of shooting
Arizona.
there. Yeah, at Baldwin, Arizona. The gun sight road was worse than it is now. I thought the car was going to die going. Excuse me. I was thinking I should have got something with four-wheel drive to make this trip. But I watched over the years as he literally established high-speed, low-drag firearms training for the private citizen, which had not existed in this country until, the closest they'd had to it was the Sized as Arms, the schools of arms for young gentlemen in New Orleans who were going to fight duels with each other.
Oh, wow.
Firearms training consisted of firearm safety, one-handed pistol marksmanship. You had to be a cop to shoot police combat. And Cooper basically founded the concept of a private shooting school
What do you think his motivation was? Why did he want to teach civilians?
to protect the public. If you read his writings, he was a brilliant man and a very articulate one. And he believed in not only the right, but really the moral and ethical duty to protect one's family and to protect one's own life.
Mom. Who's someone else that you've met that maybe we've heard of? Maybe they're famous in the Second Amendment world. Maybe they're famous outside of the Second Amendment world. Who's somebody else that you met that you are particularly impressed with, or you enjoyed meeting them?
Well, on the training side, Ray Chapman took me under his wing in 1978 when I met him at the IPSC National Championships in Los Angeles. Ray had been one of the original combat masters with Jeff. Late 50s, early 60s, Jeff really began what we now know as practical shooting competition or combat shooting competition in California. And in 1976, I believe, was the Columbia Conference at Ray Chapman's range, Chapman Academy in Columbia, Missouri, that founded IPSC, the International Practical Shooting Confederation, the U.S. arm of which now is USPSA, the United States Practical Shooting Association. Bill Wilson, who has done a number of podcasts that you'll find educational on the Wilson Combat Channel, found that IPSC was getting a little too sophisticated in terms of gear, with guns that nobody would ever actually carry on the street but would be useful for winning matches. And in the 1990s, he formed IDPA, the International Defensive Pistol Association, excuse me, which is essentially the concealed carry handgun sport.
Yeah.
So over the years, we've seen a lot of people who are very, very pivotal in the rise of the concept of the responsibly armed American citizen. On the gun rights side, I got to meet Joe Tartarow and Alan Gottlieb in the 1970s. A year or two before, Alan had founded Second Amendment Foundation and the Citizens Committee for the Right to Keep and Bear Arms. And when I went to the first of their meetings that they held in Boston, I said, oh my God, I've got to be a part of this.
Wow.
That we had men like Cates and Benenson, whom I've mentioned, Bob Cottrell, who's still with us, the pioneers, really, who were doing the legal research. They said, look, the Second Amendment is not about National Guard. The Second Amendment clearly is about individual rights to self-protection. Here is the legal scholarship, the original of which was funded by Gottlieb, that led us ultimately to the Heller decision, the McDonald decision, the Bruin decision. So I've been fortunate enough to be in the presence of greatness.
Yeah, no question.
And I've learned from all of them, and all of us who've learned from those people have tried as much as we can to distill and spread that knowledge to others who need it. A whole lot of those people that I just mentioned are no longer with us, but their legacy lives, and it lives in organizations like yours, like San Diego Gun Owners. The spirit of self-protection, the spirit of being able to fulfill your responsibilities to family, to neighbors, to society. And that, in essence, is what it's all about, and that's why I'm always happy to be here and be in the presence of guys and gals like you.
Well, that's awesome. I think very kind words. Have you over the years formed any kind of relationship with like an like a leader on the other side, or somebody a thought leader on the other side, or anything like that? Have you ever formed a relationship with anyone from the enemy?
No, I prefer to
me
think
either.
of them as opponents, not enemies. An enemy wants you to die. An opponent simply wants you to submit. I can't say friendships. There are some that I've been able to sit down and talk with, and I found a whole lot of people who are for a while on the other side. If you can get them to listen to you and look at the facts, will eventually drift away from the anti-position and become either neutral or lightly on our side. The ones who are serious will never go from, okay, I'm totally anti to now I'm, the reincarnation of Professor Don Cates. But they will start to drift away from their vehement advocacy of gun prohibition. That said, a whole lot of people who are involved in it and make money from being anti-gun are, of course, going to keep being anti-gun.
Yeah, no question. People are better served spending their time organizing those who agree with us and getting them activated, rather than trying to argue with people who disagree with us, especially so vehemently. I was absolutely convinced I was going to meet the leadership of the anti-gun folks here in San Diego, and they were going to be wooed by my knowledge and passion and change. And I got stabbed in the back a few times, and it's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. So I've found that fence sitters, people who love and trust you in your life, people in your circle of influence, like you said, can be moved, but we should spend a lot more time. If you're out there wondering what you can do more of, it's getting people who agree with you activated and involved, and finding those who have sincere questions and getting them involved and introducing them.
One by one. I'm absolutely convinced of the truth of the 10-80-10 rule, which holds that on any polarized debate like this, there are going to be maybe 10% of people who are on one side absolutely committed to it and are never going to change. 10% on the other side who are just as committed to the opposite side of the argument. And in between, 80% of people who have not yet said, all right, I'm going to lock into this and make this part of my value system and make it my issue. They might be leaning one way, they might be leaning another, but they will listen. And they are willing to change if you can give them a damned good reason to. And those are the ones we speak to. We will never convert the David Hoggs to being one of us.
No.
They simply committed too much of their own identity to what they're doing.
It's a good way of putting it. They've committed too much of their own identity, who they are. So asking them to change their mind or, follow logic and reason is asking them to completely and totally change who they are, their identity, which is, good luck. Good luck trying to get anybody to do that, let alone an anti-gunner. So what else? Is there anything else you want to make sure that folks listening know or are excited about, or, any kind of message that you want to make sure to get out there?
You might want to politely write to your representatives in Washington and urge them to support national reciprocity. That has been a holy grail for so many of us. And most other countries, if you're legal to carry a gun, you're legal to carry it anywhere in that nation. Okay, here we have that patchwork quilt I spoke of earlier. There's no real logic to it. It's just, the way things have developed. It's like old country roads that originally were formed by mules and horses taking the line of least resistance, now become the paved roads of today when they should have been laid out a whole lot straighter and more efficiently. I think reciprocity is going to be one of the big coming issues. Other than that, would like to see every state pass a legislative package like Florida's, the so-called Stand Your Ground package, which actually, God, like 20 years ago now, was probably 4 different pieces of legislation in one. It removed the then requirement to retreat before using deadly force, hence the title Stand Your Ground for all of them. It reinforced castle doctrine, the principle that your home is your castle, and attacked there by a criminal, you may immediately resort to deadly force to stop that attack. There was a tort reform element that said if the legal system, criminal justice system, has determined a shooting to be self-defense, a judge can and should throw out any lawsuit against you based on the same act. And finally, the so-called Stand Your Ground hearing, which ironically has nothing to do with the Stand Your Ground principle, Florida Statute 776.032, which says if you are criminally charged and are claiming self-defense, they will have a 776.032 hearing, essentially a mini bench trial with just the judge. And if the judge determines this was indeed self-defense, the case is thrown out there without a full-blown trial, and it's dead like a vampire with a stake in its heart and a clove of garlic in its mouth. And when you see people who become political footballs and a righteous self-defense shooting, whether it was officer involved or citizen involved, now becomes a cause celeb, and they're lighting the torches and marching on the courthouse and demanding your head on a platter. That sort of legislation, I think, would be helpful to society, and we have found in Florida certainly it has been effective in reducing wrongful charges against innocent people.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate all your time. I appreciate your time here in the interview. I appreciate you coming out to California. You've always been generous with your time, and you've allowed me to interview you over the phone and in person multiple times. And I'm just so happy that our listeners get to hear from you, and folks here in San Diego get to train with you. And I appreciate your support and all the kind of things you've said about Gun Owners Radio and San Diego County gun owners.
I'm delighted to be here, and it's going to sound like a mutual admiration society. But folks, if you haven't joined San Diego Gun Owners, do. They're doing a great job for you out here, and they're a role model for grassroots activism.
That's awesome. Thank you very much. Massad Ayoob, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Okay. There we go. That was awesome, man.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah, I like that very much. Museum in Ogden, which is just amazing. Guns after guns after guns, all about John Moses Browning. But there's one thing in particular that I just learned, and that is that of the many, many things that John Browning invented, he was the first one to make a shotgun that was actually an over and under. So it was a double barrel, but not a side-by-side, it was an over-under. And that was his design. The very first over-under shotgun. Anyway, this is super interesting, well worth the trip. If you ever are going to be anywhere near Salt Lake City or Ogden, anywhere near Utah, you got to come here. It's so cool. He was such a prolific inventor and such an amazing American. I mean, it's just amazing how many things we take for granted that he invented, that were his idea, that he came up with. Here's another example. This is called the flapper gun, and basically it's a lever action. You can see it's a lever action, but what he did is at the muzzle, he has this plate, and when the gases come out of the end of the muzzle, it pushes that plate, and this line right here, this post, works the action. So you don't actually take it and work the action like a normal lever action. The gases push this thing, and it automatically works it. It's called the flapper rifle. And this, of course, was a very early attempt at a semi-automatic, but conceptually, if you think about it, this really works just like an AK-47. It's the same piston type, semi-automatic design from an AK-47, and John Browning tried it on a lever action here first. So anyway, very cool. Highly recommend. Talk to you guys later.